welcome to the planning meeting. Just to introduce on my left is the legal officer, on my right the planning officer, and I'm the chair of this Huddersfield Planning Committee. Right, we'll move on then to item 1, membership of the committee. There'll be some vacancies, well, not vacancies, but people who aren't here and replacements.
Yeah. Apology from Councillor Sarwar.
Otherwise, we're all present and correct. Minutes of previous meeting. Somebody prepared to move them? Moved. Yeah, seconded. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Interest and lobbying. Start with you, Councillor McGuinn.
Yeah, I've been lobbied on item 13 by Jim Dyson. Thank you.
None, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Application number 2018-91581, item number 13. I received an email, no action taken.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to Councillor Uller, item 91581, lobbied, no action taken, and again, well, by two people on that application.
Yeah, this item 91581, I've had 2 emails about this from objectors, no advice or action taken.
And I'm the same, 2 emails on which I haven't acted.
And I have nothing to declare. Move on then to item 4, admission of the public. Public are here, whoever representatives. Deputations and petitions. We did the site visits. So I'll move on now to the appeals.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Teresa Harlow, Development Management Team Leader. In respect of agenda item 12, there are 3 planning appeals to report, all of which were dismissed. This includes an application at Gawthorpe Lane, Lepton, for a dwelling that was determined by members of the committee. In addition to that, there's 1 appeal against an enforcement notice regarding a wall and engineering operations at 300 New Hay Road. This is the wall, gates and engineering operations in question. The appeal was dismissed and the enforcement notice was upheld. For members' information, here is a photo, as we can see there, of the engineering operations undertaken, and we can also see what it looked like before the walls and gates were built there. There's an 8-week period of compliance to do the works, which is to reduce the wall down to no more than 1 metre in height and regrade the land back, and that expires on the 23rd of May. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on then to the planning applications, and our first one is page 27, and it's 481 New Hay Road, Sallandine Nook.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Nicholas Hurst. This application seeks the erection of 1 dwelling with detached garage. It is brought to committee due to there being a high level of public objection. Various concerns are raised by members of the public, but the principal concerns can be summarised as design, impact on neighbouring residents and highways. The proposed dwelling is 2 storeys. It is set back in the site following the layout of other dwellings along Longwood Edge Road, as can be seen on plan now. Properties fronting onto New Hay Road are predominantly bungalows, as is a side neighbour number 67 Longwood Edge Road. However, as a chalet bungalow, it is taller than the traditional bungalow. Other than number 67, dwellings fronting onto Longwood Edge Road are prominently 2 storeys, with the current image showing a comparison of height and scale between the proposed dwelling, number 67, and then number 65, which is more indicative of the dwellings along Longwood Edge Road. And here is an image showing 67, 65, and 63. The site formerly was number 481 New Hay Roads Garden. The site has been unequally divided between the new dwelling and number 481. This did raise initial concerns from officers. However, during the course of the application, number 481 has been sold, with the bungalow's garden being reduced in the deed to that of the planning application, as can be seen on the boundary in the photo. As it no longer falls under the same ownership, officers do not object. Members of the public have expressed significant concerns regarding the access onto Longwood Edge Road. However, because of the site's location on the outside of the bend, the access would have more than acceptable sight lines. The front boundary wall is reduced to 1 metre in height to ensure inter-visibility, with these sight lines being 43 metres as required for a 30-mile-per-hour road, with on-site turning being achievable. The report before members outlines officers' full assessment of the proposal. This includes responses to the concerns raised by members of the public. As a brief overview, the site is unallocated. While within a garden, the site fronts onto Longwood Edge Road, and the proposal would follow an existing pattern of development. Regarding design, while next to a bungalow with other bungalows in the area, officers consider that a proposed 2-storey dwelling would not appear incongruous on Longwood Edge Road, where it would be principally seen, which hosts a mixed variety of properties. On residential amenity, the dwellings to the rear are a suitable distance away to prevent concerns of overlooking. As I have already commented on number 48's garden space, the proposed dwelling will be on the side of number 67 Longwood Edge Road. It is to project beyond their rear elevation, but on balance, given the separation of the new dwelling to the shared boundary, the established step pattern of development, and that number 67 has its own single-storey rear extension along the boundary, officers do not anticipate the proposal to cause material harm to number 67's occupiers. I have previously addressed the principal highway concerns from residents, and therefore officers recommend approval with nothing further to add, Chair.
David Story. Thank you, Chair. Members, my name is David Story. I'm a Chartered Town Planner speaking on behalf of the applicant. You've got a very comprehensive report from your officer which sets out the details and issues raised with the application. In terms of principle of development, it's clear that that's been accepted in terms of the style and form of development that faces onto Longwood Edge Road, and you've got a staggered pattern which this obviously repeats in that respect. In terms of the highway issues, it actually couldn't be in a better position on this road, right at the top side of the bend in the road, so that you have visibility which is acceptable in both directions. And we also provide adequate internal turning space so vehicles can enter and leave in a forward gear, unlike the immediate neighbouring property 67, which doesn't have those turning facilities and would have to either reverse into or out of that property. So in highways, there are no issues in that respect. It's satisfactory in terms of policy and guidance. In terms of amenity, you've heard the situation regarding 481, that has now been sold, and the party that bought that knowing and wanting a smaller garden area. So that hasn't been compromised as a result of this application. In terms of your adopted policies, it satisfies space standards, and in design terms, it's compatible and comparable in terms of massing, and design is appropriate in that location. So I would obviously commend the officer's recommendation to you. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Members. Councillor Sims.
Move officer's recommendations, Chair.
Please show. Page 43. The officer will doing the presentation here, and which will cover both these applications on page 43 and 53.
Chair. Thank you, Teresa. My name's Craig McHugh. I'm the Senior Conservation and Design Officer. The proposal is a joint planning permission and listed building consent for the demolition of the existing single-storey rear extension and erection of a two-storey rear extension. It includes the infill of the side passageway to form part of the dwelling and formation of a new window to the front elevation. This plan shows the location of the proposed development, highlighted red, and the nearby listed buildings, highlighted, outlined in blue. Number 95 forms part of a long terrace of stone-built properties on the south side of Church Street. It comprises a mix of back-to-back properties, mostly at the east end, and through terrace properties, mostly at the west end. It's bookended by the commercial public house and the Paddock Community Trust Centre. Robin Street runs parallel to the rear of the terrace. There are numerous listed buildings in the immediate area, including much of Church Terrace here and the former All Saints Church across the road. In terms of the front elevation shown here, number 95 is one of 4 properties forming the Grade 2 listed building 93 to 99 Church Street, and they date from the 19th century, mid-19th century. It's one of the better preserved buildings in the group and retains timber sash windows to the front and the through passageway that connects Church Street with the rear yard. This is the rear of the property. In common with other properties that form part of the listed building, except for windows and doors, the rear elevation of the 4 houses forming the listed building remains largely unaltered since it was listed in 1978. Number 95 has a mid-20th century single-storey extension of artificial stone with a flat roof. Looking at the significance of the heritage assets, this shows the 4 listed buildings that form part of the listed building. Sorry, the one to the right of the blue car is under a separate listing. Buildings are listed for their architectural and historic interest. Architecturally, the polite classical details of 93 to 99 set them apart from dwellings of a similar date and are particularly significant for the contribution they make to the character of the street scene and the setting of nearby listed buildings. Historically, they were constructed in an era of great concern about the living conditions of working people, and the first regulations to control development were introduced at this time. In 1849 in Paddock, it was the centre of a cholera outbreak in Huddersfield in which 17 people died. The inclusion in the house layout of a through passage for the removal of human waste from outdoor privies in the rear yard, as we saw on site, was a response to such concerns and would have set them apart from earlier insanitary housing. This is the 1850 Ordnance Survey map, which illustrates the issues here. At this point, Church Terrace had been partly completed. You can see the area highlighted in red. That's a number of privies, probably 4 or 5, shared by about 12 properties on this group of buildings here. To the rear was a quarry and a tent field for local textile workers. So there was no room for the back street that has since been laid out, which is Robin Street, and I've indicated that with a green arrow here. The blue rectangle shows you where the listed building was subsequently constructed. This is the 1890 OS map, and you can see now that the terrace has been completed. Number 95 is indicated with a red star here. Robin Street had now been laid out, so there were no need for the through passages between the front of the street and the rear yards. So many of those had already been built over with extensions by 1890. They're indicated with the red crosses at 105, 99 and 97. So today there are only 2 left in this group of listed buildings at 93 and 95 to help tell the story about the evolution of the site and about the sanitary conditions they were trying to promote with the housing. This is the proposals for the front elevation and the rear elevation. The proposals would involve partly walling up the passageway entrance and inserting a window, This would be harmful. The existing modern front door would be replaced, and that would be an enhancement. On the rear elevation, the proposed development would result in the alteration of the roof slope and the loss of the stone brackets to the gutters. The through passage would be built across at the rear with a full height glazed window indicated in blue near the line of the through passage to mark where it once was, and these alterations would be harmful. The extension would not be subservient to the existing building, as it would cover nearly 90% of the rear elevation on plan. This is the side elevation showing the alterations to the roof, which as proposed would consist of a double pitch, part of which would remain at about 30 degrees and part of which would be 20 degrees. This would be harmful to the visual appearance of the building and vulnerable to failure in the future. A stone slate roof of stone flags is normally laid at a pitch of 30 degrees or greater, so it would be reliant on a membrane underneath to perform adequately. These are the floor plans for the proposed development. With regards to the listed building consent only, of course. Internally, the through passage would be incorporated into the house, and that would be harmful. That's highlighted in red. Later partitions would be removed, which would reinstate the original proportions of two of the rooms, which are highlighted in green, so that would be an enhancement. In terms of other issues, there are no concerns with regards to the impact on the amenity of neighbours or on highway safety. So to conclude, any harm to heritage assets is failure in principle, since the National Planning Policy Framework sets as an objective protecting and enhancing the historic environment, and great weight is given to its conservation. The proposed development would cause a high level of harm to the significance of the listed building, particularly with regards to the historic interest in the through passage and the architectural interest of the rear elevation. The proposals would also harm the setting of adjacent listed buildings. The local authority has not been able to reduce that harm sufficiently through negotiations with the applicant, and it's not been clearly and convincingly justified. Even though this would be less than substantial harm, great weight should be given to that harm. The proposed development has some modest public benefits, specifically the replacement front door and the removal of later partitions internally that would better reveal the significance of the building. However, this would not be sufficient to outweigh the high level of harm caused by the proposals. Therefore, the development doesn't accord with the design and heritage policies in the local plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. It's therefore the officer's recommendation that the proposed development be refused, both for planning permission and listed building consent. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, we have Steve Mahmood, who's the applicant.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, honourable members of the Council. I am Asif, the applicant. Because I've got limited time, so I'll just make some points, and I'll just go according to them. Although the terrace is listed, it is only the front of the houses that are attractive and of historic interest. The rear of the houses on the terrace are very different and not really attractive. A lot of the passageways have been converted into part of the houses. Originally, the listed building officer was happy. Can you just move back from the microphone? It's a bit too loud. Yeah, originally, the listed building officer was happy with the proposal to alter the front elevation, as shown in one of the pictures, and he was happy to incorporate the passageway. But I think since we mentioned to bring this property into committee, he's obviously changed that to strengthen his argument. And I'm pretty sure he's mentioned it in one of the emails, and also with the meetings on site and with the councillor. The size of the rear extension proposed is similar to number 99 and 101. It's actually exactly same as 99 Church Street and 101 Church Street, and much smaller than 103 and 105 Church Street. The form of the roof has been discussed, and we have resubmitted the planning application, and again, it's similar to the other houses. Reducing the width of the extension, especially at ground floor, means we cannot create the space we want to, and spending a lot of money on a small, very small extension is just not worth for me to doing it. Leaving the gap, the sports alleyway, the passageway, from front to rear, would just create a dark, damp, useless space on the side of the house, and the passageway in the past has been broken into, and valuables have been taken from shed. And yeah, so a lot of the properties, that's another reason a lot of the properties have got rid of that passageway. As a gesture, we were going to leave a full height opening where the passage would have been on the rear to give an illusion of a passageway. The internal alterations...
30 seconds.
The internal alterations he wanted, we were willing to accommodate, and also not forgetting, we were getting rid of the flat roof extension, which actually is harmful compared to what we are proposing. The structure is very bad at the moment. I'll end it here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Members. Councillor Griffiths.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I think it's completely understandable that the applicant wants more space, and he's only doing what other people in the row have done. I'm much more concerned about the current state of the front of the house, which appears to have single glazed sash windows which are not closing properly. And as you know, we have just declared a climate emergency in Kirklees, and we can't afford to have houses that perform like that. So something needs to be done to those windows. With regard to preserving our heritage, I would just say that the Normans vandalised the Roman wall at Gloucester to build the cathedral. And I'm rather glad they did. I don't think we need to preserve that passageway to tell us about our heritage. I could say we've all got a back passage, but I won't. We no more need to preserve that passage than we need to have children working in the mills to go and look at. It's a ridiculous notion. We've got photography, and we should do it and allow it to go ahead. But I am concerned at the quality of the glazing that goes in on the back. It must be double glazing. Don't any historic officer go over there and say you'll have to put single glazing in because this building is listed.
Councillor, then Councillor Upper.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I would agree with more or less everything that Nell said. I think there are similar sizes of rear extensions on that road. I think the passageway is neither use nor ornament, but if we are to move approval, which I'm happy to move, it needs to be on the basis of what Councillor Griffiths has said in terms of the quality of the build and the materials that are used.
You're moving that then, Councillor?
Yes, I have to move.
Seconded, thank you. Councillor Uppel then and Councillor Sokol.
Yeah, I agree with what Councillor Uller said. I'm really sympathetic to what Craig said, and he gave a fabulous presentation this morning. So thank you very much for taking the time and telling us about the history of the place. But unfortunately, it's already covered up. I guess that's the only thing I would say about the passageway. You're not really able to see it anyway at the moment. So I think I'll probably have to agree with what's been said. But given the historic significance, we do need to think about, I think, materials used and what it will look like, and make sure it's at a high standard. So.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Likewise, my colleague. Can I first of all thank officer for giving us a very interesting history of this property, especially when he said these passes, in those days, it was used for delivery and a removal of human waste that time. But now, in these days, honestly, the activity is against the human rights. Inhuman. So we don't need this passage anyway. Anyway, thank you for the history of this one. But I think this family, they need some extended. You need some more space on the property. For you seen today on the site visit, we have some family there, small children, they might have mom and daughter, whatever. Yeah. So I think if we put a condition, or like my colleague said, and the material double glazing and matching material on the back, because the front I don't think it will change any case. But we certainly need new glazing window on those property. It make looking very professional. Yeah. Thank you, man. So I'll go along with my colleague. Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded, but Councillor McGuinn wishes to have a. Do you want to put your light on or put your? It's a slow reaction, is that?
Oh, on, right. All right. Interesting what Councillor Griffiths says. I don't want you to stop looking after the list of buildings, and I think it's important we keep important historical artefacts. So I thought there's a lot of my constituents would love to be able to put double glazing in the Iron list of properties, but we must preserve as much as possible the list of buildings and although I'm not going to object, I'm not going to vote against it, I feel I must abstain on this issue because I think
Could I just answer that, Councillor McGuinn? When in fact the other three have all got double glazing, plus the eyesore on that building is the listed windows. They're absolutely terrible. They want stripping at least and repainting, that's the very least.
Yeah.
But double glazing is the answer because that's what the others have got. So it's just common sense.
But we've got to preserve the past in some respect.
Have the other three been like that? That would have been different, but they aren't.
You've got to set a standard. You've got to set a standard, right? And the council is trying to set a standard. I applaud them for doing that. And I'm not going to vote against this, but I'm saying it's good that the officers are making a stand and putting the point of view that we should be preserving these things. And if it's the only one, perhaps that's what we should be doing, looking after it. So thank you very much.
It would stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah. Can we leave it to the officer to decide? Do we need double glazing window or we need to keep the same window? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
The officer just wants to summarise here.
Thank you, Chair. From the members' debate, it appears that members think there are public benefits that outweigh the harm to the significance of the building from the development proposed, and that includes removing the artificial stone flat-roofed rear extension, about the passageway will be acknowledged in the design of the extension through where the window is at the front and the full height glazed opening at the rear, and members wish to see a sympathetic palette of materials which includes the stone slate roof, which will have a membrane underneath, natural stone walls, and also we'll detail the conditions acknowledging what members have said about the windows on the site. Thank you, Chair.
You want a last word, Councillor Sims?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, we can preserve some of it. The sash windows, today you can have modern sash windows that take double glazing that looks original. You can.
It's expensive.
Well,
Unfortunately, the principle of sliding and the principle of airtightness are contrary principles. So it's better not to have sliding sashes. It's better to have mock openers that look like sliding sashes.
that's what I said, isn't it? The modern idea of sash windows, they look the same, right? But they take double glazing, right?
Let's move away from the windows and move to the vote, please.
But I think, listen, I think the main thing is that the quality of the build needs to be kept an eye on. Okay?
We're all agreed on that. But first of all, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. That's item 14, because there is the next one, item 15. Can we have the same proposer and same seconder for the next one? All those in favour, please show. Thank you. We now move to page 61, which is 39 Springdale Avenue, Thornton Lodge.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jason Hammond. I am the case officer for this application. The application has been brought to Huddersfield Subcommittee at the request of Councillor Korshik. Members visited the site this morning. The application relates to the erection of a two-storey rear extension and front dormers, as well as rear decking at 39 Springdale Avenue in Thornton Lodge, as shown in the location plan, with the property outlined in red. The property has benefited from a two-storey side extension that was approved in 2005 that was noted during the earlier site visit. The rear extension will be designed with two rear projecting gables with a staggered projection with different heights, as shown in the above elevation plans. The extension is to project 3.6 metres on the northern side and 3 metres on the southern side. To note, the property is set back from the neighbouring property at number 37, meaning the extension will project 1.4 metres beyond this property line on the northern end. The rear of the property is visible from the highway to the south on Nelson Street, as shown above from Google Street imagery. It is officer's opinion that the proposed design in this prominent position would be of significant harm upon the street scene, being out of keeping of the character of the area. There is no example of any design like this within the locality. Amendments were received that reduced the projection from 4 metres to 3.6 metres on the northern side. Further amendments were requested to either have the extension in line with number 37 or have a flush projection of 3 metres throughout. The applicant was not willing to compromise on this. In terms of residential impact, the projection of 1.4 metres along the northern boundary here would not result in any detrimental overbearing impact onto number 37. There was no significant concerns for other neighbouring properties. With regards to highways, it was demonstrated that at least 2 off-street spaces can be provided that would be sufficient. To conclude, the proposal is recommended for refusal due to being of an irregular appearance which would result in an out-of-keeping feature set in a prominent position, being detrimental to the character and appearance of the local street scene. This will be contrary to policy PLP 24 of the Kirklees local plan and paragraphs 124 and 127 of the MPPS. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Malcolm Sizer, Planning Consultant, and I'm speaking on behalf of the application. You'll note that there are no neighbour objections to the application. The detailed officer's report makes clear that there are no objections in terms of impact on the amenity of neighbours or highway safety. The only issue is impact on visual amenity. The house is neither listed nor is it in a conservation area. Proposal does not affect the setting of a listed building. The proposed materials, natural stone and roof tiles are to match those of the dwelling. The new extension is stepped to respect the alignment of the rear walls of the adjoining dwellings. Could I have the photos taking the rear view, please? Thank you. Thank you.
stepped so as to accord with general policy regarding extensions. A projection restricted to 3 metres alongside number 41 to the right, to the left as you look at the elevation, and a projection of only 1.4 metres beyond the rear wall of number 37 to the right as we look at it. Accordingly, it is difficult to understand officers' concerns that the scale of the proposal is unacceptable. So far as design is concerned, the 2 separate gables facing the rear are considered far preferable to the extension being designed with either a flat roof or alternatively a single gable, which, as expressed by Councillor Cushig, would be more formidable than what is now proposed. In the context of the adjoining much higher gable wall at number 37, the proposal would not be unduly prominent or incongruous as seen from the rear street. I would urge you to accept the officer recommendation, not to accept the officer recommendation, but to approve the application, please. Sure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members. Councillor Sokol.
Yeah. Chair. Sorry, this way. Yeah. I just reading the history of the relevant planning history of this property. I think this in year 2004, 2005, twice have been planning permission being granted for the 2-story building. How is that time?
I've had it mooted there might be a possibility of a deferment here. I don't know. I think I see quite a few faces and I can see an exclamation mark or even a question mark. So, move defer. That's seconded. All in favour, please.
Through you, Chair, can I just, is that a defer to think again about the design, taking into account what the reason for refusal put forward and the scale of the development? Thank you, Chair.
Right, we move on then to page 69, and it's Hollingbank Farm, Crossgate Road, Holmfirth.
Thank you, Chair. The application site is situated off Crossgate Road, Holmfirth, currently accommodating 3 agricultural units, as can be seen in these photographs. The largest of these buildings accommodates rabbits in cages and a caravan where the applicant lives on a permanent basis. The site lies in the Greenbelt. The application is brought to committee at the request of Councillor Nigel Patrick for the reasons set out in paragraph 1.1 of the report. The application seeks permission for a permanent farm worker's dwelling for the applicant and his daughter, who is stated to be an employee on this farm. The justification for the proposals are set out in the committee report and takes account of the current operations of the existing enterprise, including the need for on-site security. The plans indicate a modest-sized single-storey dwelling which is proposed to be sited along the western elevation of the large agricultural building and will be served by the existing access into the site. These photos show the context of the site in its immediate setting. So you can see the large agricultural building there, the access to the site, just wider views of the site. This is where the dwelling is proposed to be sited. The construction of new dwellings in the Greenbelt is inappropriate development and should only be approved in very special circumstances. The MPPF does, however, state that exception to the presumption against isolated dwellings in the countryside may be considered if there are an essential need for a rural worker, including those taking majority control of a farm business, to live permanently at or near their work or place in the countryside. This should be demonstrated on the grounds of animal welfare, where the need for a full-time worker on site is justified and that the enterprise is financially sound, able to sustain the farming enterprise for now and in the future. In this instance, the applicant provided information relating to the overall activities carried out, the numbers of livestock, land and their finances over a 6-year period in relation to the existing enterprise. This information was assessed by an independent agricultural surveyor on behalf of the Council. On the basis of his assessment, while officers are of the opinion that in relation to animal welfare and for security purposes, a functional need for a full-time worker to be on site can be supported, however, the applicant has failed to sufficiently demonstrate that the enterprise is financially sound. To conclude, officers are of the opinion that the very special circumstances put forward on balance do not outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt and therefore recommended for refusal for the reasons set out in the agenda. Finally, if I can just bring your attention to the further information received this last week set out in the committee update from the National Farmers Union confirming that the applicant is a member of the Farmers Union. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we have two speakers. We have Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. He's farming 175 acres, most of which is rented, and I know that's questioned in the officer's report, but in my humble opinion, having been a farmer for quite a lot of years and been associated with farming all my life, farm tenancies are commonplace, and 175 acres is in fact a viable unit. He's 150 breeding ewes plus followers, so for those non-farmers on the committee, if he's 150 breeding ewes, that means he's rearing over 300 lambs a year, so it's a fair size. He's currently living in a caravan on site, which up there in the winter must be a cold, wretched thing to do. I can't imagine I'd want to do it, and can't imagine anyone else. But this is a genuine bloke who's trying his best to make a living out of the land that he uses. He owns the. I understand he owns the farmstead where the buildings are, and he could potentially convert an existing building into a dwelling, but then he'd have to replace the building, and that's not cost effective. For the farming enterprise to succeed and expand, the farmer needs a roof over his head on site, and I don't think there's anyone here in this room that would expect someone to continue to live in a caravan. Under PPS 7, the farmer has to justify two tests: animal welfare and financial income. Officers have already said that they're happy and satisfied. Animal welfare side of the test is satisfied. Planning authorities, I find, struggle to understand the financial side of farming, possibly because many people don't understand how hard farmers work for so little income. I've seen applications like this approved on appeal. PPS 7 has been superseded by national planning policy. Some authorities like Kirklees still use it, others don't. And the planning inspector may well approve this on appeal. I support the application. As I said before, it's a genuine chap. He's a farmer, he's trying to make a living, and he needs this small house, and it is only a very small dwelling, to make this farming business work and grow. We need to support businesses across Kirklees, including rural areas. Thank you.
Paul Matthews.
Good afternoon, Chair, Member and Officers. My name is Paul Matthews. I am the agent who prepared this application on behalf of Mr Roberts. 3 minutes isn't long, so I'm not going to delve into planning policy or argue my differing opinion to that of the agricultural surveyor from Leeds City Council. Mr Roberts, the applicant, is 58 years old. He's farmed all his life and he has now grown his business to such a size where he's now at a crossroads. To continue to invest, develop and grow his farm with his daughter, they both simply need to live on site. The head and livestock, the quality of it has grown steadily over the past 17 years. To continuously operate a business successfully for 17 years without subsidy payments simply proves the business is sustainable and financially sound, despite officers' claims to the contrary. The current arrangements of Mr Roberts living in a caravan on the site are not ideal nor a long-term solution. Should this application be refused, Mr Roberts has reiterated his commitment to farm, but this will more than likely be elsewhere. The possibility of developing the current permanent buildings on site will be explored to maximise value and possibly enable him to purchase a residential property with a substantial land holding. He's been advised to auction off the land at this home firth site in small portions, again to enhance the overall value. Chances are small acreages will attract smallholders and equestrian enthusiasts who are likely to apply for menages, stables, agricultural buildings and the like. This proposal for a small farm workers' dwelling is a well thought out application. It's a genuine requirement to enable a farm business to continue and to thrive. It's a modest two-bed bungalow positioned alongside and dwarfed in size by the backdrop of the existing agricultural buildings. It's positioned so close to the agricultural buildings to ensure good farming practice and ease of access to livestock 24/7, 365. Indeed, the proposed farm workers' dwelling is not dissimilar in size or height to that of 4 stables with a field shelter and a small hay store. We've seen over the years, and also very recently, large swathes of agricultural land being developed, gone forever.
30 seconds.
Not only in the Home Valley, but also across the Kirklees district. I respectfully ask for you all to support the applicant as a true custodian of the Greenbelt, ensuring this appropriate use continues, and to make sure the openness in this locality remains for the long term. Neither Mr Roberts nor myself have any objection to any appropriate conditions and the usual agricultural tie being imposed should you support this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Homewood, Upall and Councillor Sims. Oh, and Councillor Griffiths.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, when I read the report, I was surprised really about the height of the bar that we're setting for someone to demonstrate their financial viability. I found it, I couldn't work out how anybody with a small farming business could meet the requirements that we set out here. And again, I'm not a farming expert, but as Councillor Patrick was saying, you know, okay, if you're a very large farm, you've got a large farm or business, you own a lot of land, then perhaps you can demonstrate the kind of level of viability that we're talking about here, or the amount of turnover, etc. But I just don't see how for a small farm you could demonstrate that. And I agree that if you look at how long the gentleman's obviously been doing business for, he's been obviously farming for a while, and that's reflected both in the report and in the update. You know, why else would he be taking this forward unless he wanted to continue? He saw the viability of that business. So I felt that it was too high a bar that was being set there, and I think personally that he has been able to demonstrate that. So I would support the application for approval.
Are you moving now? It's Councillor Uppal now, Councillor Sims and then Councillor Griffiths.
Can I second that? But also, I've known Mr Roberts a long time. He's been in business a long time. He has tenancy land in other places with many sheep on. The whole thing about this is I know in the past we've had a few bits and bits and pieces over that land, but it seems to now be stabilised and everything A-OK. And I'd like that this be granted, but of course the conditions have to be put on that it remains as a farm workers building. And that has to be really enforced, I think, because obviously we have had in our area where they've come along and the farm workers building, and in 5 to 10 years it's something else. But I think Mr. Roberts has proved his viability, and as Nigel said, the lean pickings in farming and hill farming these days, but he keeps his family afloat and keeps things afloat and keeps the wool from the door. And that, to me, is a good little business. So we have to support these businesses in agricultural areas. So I support this, Chair, that it goes forward. Thank you.
Say Councillor Uppal, although Councillor Sims jumped in there, but he is the ward councillor, so I think you'll give him preference on this occasion. And then Councillor Griffith.
Yeah, you did jump in, Ken, but no, you're all right. You're all right. I think he's basically said what I was going to say. You know, I agree with what they've both said here, and I think just on the finances, you know, with farming, obviously I'm no expert at all, you know, and you've got to listen to your surveyor, but, you know, it's a tough business, and it is going to be seasonally adjustable in terms of the finances that are coming through, and I do want to support them, really. And I think the key thing is what Ken said is, I guess the worry is that it might become some sort of Airbnb property at some point, and that's not what you'd want to see. So I think one of the officers had mentioned a agricultural occupancy order, which might be able to be put in place. So if there's anything like that we can do, I'd support it.
Well, I'm quite surprised, I have to say. Firstly, given the slating that some of members of the council have had for proposing housing developments on Greenbelt, coming from the Tories, that all of a sudden we do want a house built on Greenbelt is great. Thank you. Right. Yeah. I do apologise. I forgot. I do apologise. As to... I don't approve of putting new housing, individual houses on Greenbelt. If we need to have a housing development for hundreds of people, I can see some justification for that. But one-offs, the problem if we go for this, I can tell you there are barns going up all along the Colne Valley, and in 20 years the people will be coming to us saying, oh, we need an agricultural worker here. Councillor Patrick did say it will go to appeal, so he obviously is anticipating it will go to appeal, and I would suggest to my colleagues that we let it go to appeal and see what the National Planning Officer says about it. I know all farmers are poor. I mean, Frank Muir once said he went in a helicopter between London and Oxford and had never realised how every farmer needed a swimming pool.
Councillor Ola.
I think it's based on the two tests, isn't it? One's animal welfare. I don't think there's a problem with that. The other one's the income, which I think is a little bit flaky. I think, you know, for a small holding, or, you know, how does he demonstrate that? He's trying to do whatever he can. So I do agree with what Ken and Nigel have said on that. And that's it.
Has it been moved and seconded? Moved and seconded for approval against the officer's recommendation. All those in favour, please show. Have we got a reason? We've got a reason, yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, 4.
Against?
Against.
And I'll abstain.
Thank you, Chair. To conclude, members considered that it did meet policy PLP 55 of the local plan, which relates to agricultural and forestry workers' dwellings.
Right, now page 81, and this is the Hogley Farm, Hogley Lane, Holmfirth.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks the demolition of a stable and the erection of a domestic games room associated with Hogley Farm. It is brought to committee at the request of Councillor Patrick, who does not consider it to be appropriate development within the Greenbelt. This image shows the existing stable. And this image shows it adjacent to the closest neighbouring property, and you'll note the significant ground differences. Now, can you just come through? You can just see the dotted line on there showing the current structure size compared to that. The officer report contains a full assessment of officers' assessment. In short, first considering the principle, the site is within the Greenbelt. The proposal is considered to be the redevelopment of a brownfield site without causing greater harm to the openness, which is an exemption allowed within the Greenbelt. Therefore, our officers consider it to be acceptable within the Greenbelt. In terms of design, the structure's appearance is considered to reflect and harmonise with the existing rural character, appearing as a converted stable. Regarding amenity, the sole closest neighbour is the adjacent bungalow. As per the image here, it is not considered to cause harmful overbearing or overshadowing. There are to be roof lights in the rear to be obscure glazed to prevent concerns of overlooking. Sorry, I did include this in here. Here shows the current scale of the property in red with the replacement building shown underneath, although it does set back slightly greater to the rear. As proposal is appropriate development within the Greenbelt and does not cause harm to visual amenity or neighbouring properties, officers recommend approval with nothing further to add, Chair.
We have 4 speakers altogether. First speaker I've got is Dominic Shallard.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, councillors, for letting me speak to you today. My name is Dominic Shallard. I'm a neighbour and I'm objecting to this proposal. I'm fairly new to Kirklees and I've been doing my research on the planning committee, and it obviously strikes an impressive balance between responsible development and protecting the green belt, and it was pleasing to hear today Councillor Griffiths refer to the fact that we do have a climate emergency. And I also note, because everyone's trying to get my vote for the 2nd of May, that the Conservatives are very keen to protect the green belt. I'm really pleased to discover that the Labour Party is committed to embedding the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations into if it's a future government, and the Lib Dems are the same. My objection briefly centres on paragraph 10.7 of the officer's report, and I should say that I've found my dealings with the officers to be immaculate, as well as the local councillors. I've had experience of this in a previous place where I lived, and no one's been as helpful as Nick Hurst has been. But I do disagree with his definition of what constitutes a brownfield site development. I used to live in Salford, and my first place I rented, was built on smelting works, and it's clear that Hogley Lane is not similar to this in any sense whatsoever. It's enjoyed by thousands of walkers from Kirklees and beyond, for its flora, its fauna, its woodland and its animal life. And the proposed so-called games room, which I dispute that actually will be a games room, threatens this, I think. It's clearly not a brownfield site. It's out of keeping with the adjoining properties. The proposed masonry is unsightly. I think many of the residents around that area feel that this is a Trojan horse for a potential Airbnb establishment. And the final point that I wish to make, Chair, is that I think it's quite notable that here today we've actually have objections from 4 of the 6 residences in the area, and three properties are represented here today. The applicant is Councillor Hogley, who is the chair of the parish council, and I'm not sure whether she's represented here today, but I think we feel quite strongly about this. This isn't a NIMBY application. It's simply because we feel that this proposal would really threaten the pleasure for so many people who walk at weekends and throughout the week through this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have Bill Warner.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Bill Warnock. Dominic Shillard has spoken as a relatively new resident in the Hoggy community and described what attracted him to live there and its plus points. I would like to talk as the oldest resident in the area. I don't just mean age, I mean at length of staying there. I have lived for over 40 years in the Home Valley, and I have lived in the property adjoining Hogley Farm on two sides for 29 years. I've seen every other property change hands, sometimes several times. One very welcome feature throughout this has been that there has been a minimum of change of the type which impacts adversely on the openness and visual amenity of this community. I was here when the stables concerned in this application were built. I know the couple who were the owners of Hogley Farm at the time, and I'm still in touch with them. They had wanted not to build the stables where they are, but to build them in one of their fields, the better to preserve the openness of their outlook and the enjoyment of everyone else, including walkers, but they were advised they would not get approval for this. The solution that was acceptable to the planners at the time was for the stables to be built adjacent to the house, so long as they met the conditions in size, height, distance, etc. for permitted development, and was in nature a temporary structure. This was agreed by all the parties involved, and a wooden kit building was erected quickly. This was just about acceptable without seeming inappropriate in nature or overly intrusive in Greenbelt, as anything larger or more permanent or using less harmonious materials would have been. I've argued throughout the history of this and somewhat unusual progress of this application that what is proposed does not satisfy the special reasons permitting development in Greenbelt. It also seems strange to me that if this is to be a building as stated as a games room for children, why it needs to be anything other than a weatherproof wooden structure and why it needs water, drainage and a bathroom. I do not think this meets the reasons for building in Greenbelt, and I think it should not be approved, and I ask you to refuse the application as it stands. Thank you.
We have Nick Worth.
Thank you, Chair. Nick Willock of Robert Halsteads for the objectors. Members, speaking on behalf of three neighbouring properties all here today, there is one key issue with this proposal that I'd like to draw your attention to. It's an important issue because it determines not just what happens today, but what could happen in the future as a result of approving this application as it stands. This key question is whether the current building can be judged as temporary or permanent. The Greenbelt policy exception recommended by officers allows for redevelopment of a brownfield site, providing the buildings are not temporary. Turning then to the Greenbelt clause that could be relevant in future, this allows for the reuse of existing buildings, providing they are, and please remember these words for later, of permanent and substantial construction. Stable blocks have traditionally been granted in Kirklees, conditional upon them being small in scale and of temporary materials such as timber, as this was aimed at ensuring they didn't remain permanent fixtures in the landscape, and more importantly, wooden stables couldn't then be converted to other more permanent uses, which would then have a potentially greater impact on the Greenbelt, such as houses with residential curtilage, gardens, parking and the like. Wooden stables are frequent sites across the Kirklees countryside, so you can imagine the impact on the Greenbelt if they were all replaced with permanent buildings of different uses. As an aside, I'm told that the previous owners of the applicant's property have said that the stables were assembled in a day and could be dismantled in a day. This adds weight to the residents' views that the stables should be treated as a temporary structure in this case and therefore don't qualify for brownfield redevelopment status. As such, what the residents are concerned about is the replacement of these timber stables with a new structure of solid wall masonry construction and foundations, which would not only mean the building is going to be there in perpetuity, but would also, remembering those words from earlier, permanent and substantial, mean that the building would then qualify for a change of use in future as a matter of principle under Greenbelt policy. However, having discussed whether a compromise is available, the neighbouring residents would have no objections to a replacement building for the applicant's children providing the building was, like the stables...
30 seconds.
Providing the building, like the stables, was built of timber only, with no masonry walls or foundations. That way, the building would remain temporary, the long-term impacts on the greenbelt would be neutral, and the neighbouring residents most affected by this would be satisfied there would be no greenbelt policy exceptions available in the future for development or conversion to potentially more harmful uses. Thank you.
One more speaker, and that's Councillor Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Short and sweet this one will be, I think, because all the points have been made. If I can control myself after the outburst by Councillor Griffiths, but anyway. Hogley Farm is not a working farm. It's not a working farm, it is a private residence. Compare and contrast with the previous application where we had a farmer wanting to build a small residence to run a farm. This one is to turn a temporary wooden structure into a permanent building simply to use as a games room. Which one of the two should go ahead and which one shouldn't go ahead? From my point, this is the Greenbelt, a permanent structure simply to be used as a games room should not be allowed. And I share the concerns of the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. Members. Councillor Sid.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think we should refuse this because I remember it coming on site. It was a temporary building. I said so on site this morning. But also it's changing the complete tenure of a building that was put up really in an agricultural era for horses. And it completely turns it on its head. To be a games room and a playroom, once it has foundations and solid walls, etc., it can then be converted at a later date. And we've all seen it, it all happens. People love living out there, and to get another house out there, they'd be joyous and make a lot of money out of it. So I think it's all been said. I think it should be refused. I can't see it coming under the brownfield site at all, because if you look it up, it was a temporary building and was supposed to be so. So therefore I would not like to see a permanent building there. Quite happy to see it being used as stables and things like that, but not gaming rooms. So therefore I ask this committee to support me and make sure that this is a definite no-no. Thank you.
Councillor Uppel, then Councillor Griffith.
I'll have to disagree with Ken. I'm sorry about that. I don't have a problem with it. I am sympathetic with what the neighbours have said, and I think Nick made some very good points about the construction of the building. You know, I understand that your concerns are probably about it becoming an Airbnb property, you know, and it being changed into something else. So I don't know what we could do on that, but I would like, if possible, I'd like there to be some conditions on the use of it. So if it is supposed to be for a games room, that's what it should be, not convert it to an Airbnb property. I don't even know if that's possible, but that's something I would want to look at, and perhaps on some of the points that Nick made on the material that's used. I think he made a very good point. Otherwise, I'm
Thank you. I'll just start with veiled threats. I don't know what that means about containing yourself, Councillor Patrick, but you
Forget that. Let's just carry on with the planning meeting, please.
Right. I'd like to support what Councillor Sims said, and I'm against the development.
Councillor Homewood. Thanks,
Chair. So I'm struggling a little bit because I think the key point here seems to be whether the structure is permanent or not, and whether it meets that requirement. And I think the comments that have been made were fairly convincing in terms of why it's not a permanent permanent structure. And I'm looking at what it says in the report, and obviously there's some reference, for example, to the test and the case law, referring to things like, well, that the stable would need to be disassembled to be removed. Well, I presume anything would need to be disassembled to be removed. What is actually we're talking about in terms of permanence here? Because I know we're talking about what the case law establishes, but is there actually any examples that we can draw on in terms of previous applications and how those are looked at? Because it does seem to be the key point as to whether this is a permanent structure or not.
There are key tests for permanence. There is case law regarding this. And one of them is how permanently it's fixed to the ground. And another of the tests is how easy it is to assemble or disassemble it if it doesn't take a lot of effort to do either. If it is some form of shed and isn't permanently fixed into the ground and can be removed quite easily, then that might be a temporary building. For instance, a stable on skids in a field that you can move around a field, like a field shelter, wouldn't be a permanent building. So members that were on the site this morning, having heard everything in the debate, would have to satisfy themselves and the information that's in the report whether they think that building is permanent or whether they thinking about the test of permanence, is it temporary? That doesn't necessarily mean it's just there for a temporary period, but is it so permanent as to be classed as a permanent building? And that does change the assessment of the application, because in paragraph 145 of the NPPF, the partial redevelopment of previously developed land, which in our report we've gone on the side that it is a permanent building, is accepted, but if it's not, then this does specifically exclude, as we previously mentioned, temporary buildings, in which case it would be inappropriate development if that was the case. Thank you, Chair.
There isn't a specific definition of what is and what isn't permanent. It's all a case-by-case basis. I mean, it's what Teresa's outlined, how permanent you think that building is, not just in terms of whether it was intended to be there only for a short time, but in terms of its fixtures and its construction and its deconstruction.
Yeah, even I'm confused with this one, I've got to say. I do believe that there should be something there. Now, it's a case of what. And the way I see, I can understand the fear that it could be made into a proper construction of a building or perhaps a residence, and I think that's the fear that people have here. But while I don't want to sort of turn down a games room, if it's a games room that is temporary, in other words, you can't build a house on it, I would personally be quite happy with that. I don't know how. I think I've got that feeling. They can have the games room there, but it's only a temporary construction. Councillor McGuinn and then Councillor.
Hi. As a defender of the green belt, I think we've got to oppose this. I really do. Unless you can prove any special circumstance, and I don't think building a games room is a special circumstance. As regards you compare it with the last application, it's borderline, but I think we should reject this application purely because it is in the green belt. It's not a brownfield site, it's just a temporary building. And I was taken by Nick Wilcox's argument, a really good argument there about you should, if you are going to have, they had no objections to a temporary building there, so it's the materials we'd be looking at, wouldn't it? But as it stands, I think I have to reject it. But if we members are minded, perhaps we could look at deferring it and looking at different material suggestions for if that's possible.
I'd like to move rejection.
Are you starting from the basis that you consider the structure on site is temporary, therefore it's in...
Right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Those against? 2 against.
Application is refused.